For much more about Iran and the dilemma it poses for the Obama administration, we're joined once again by Ervand Abrahamian. He was born in Iran, is the author of several books about that country, and is a distinguished professor of history at the City University of New York. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
What's behind Iran's latest missile launch? It's
Iran's way of saying they won't be intimidated by United States, and it comes right in the footsteps of a resolution passed by the House of Representatives in Washington, toughening sanctions and threatening very strict sanctions on Iran. And in that context, they're sort of saying to their own public and to the world that they won't be intimidated.
And how important is that context here in terms of how Iran might perceive what is going on in terms of U.S. policy?
Well, I think some decision makers there might be sophisticated enough to see the differences between Obama administration and the House of Representatives. But unfortunately, I think people around Ahmadinejad don't have that sophistication and are likely to misinterpret the actual resolution in the Congress as actually a Obama administration policy.
So we just heard this report, as you were saying, about the House moving forward on a plan to impose new sanctions against Iran. Would tougher sanctions have the desired effect by compelling Iran to come to the negotiating table, or would they just end up hurting ordinary Iranians?
Well, I think it will hurt ordinary Iranians, but it won't actually encourage Iran to negotiate, because their reaction would be the more they're pushed to the wall, the more likely they become intransigent. And from the people around Ahmadinejad's circle, it really wouldn't be bad to have a confrontation with the United States and Israel. It would actually strengthen their own internal position.
What do you mean by that, a confrontation? Do you mean a military confrontation? Or?
Well, in the long run, if there are Israeli airstrikes on Iran, of course, that would include that type of military confrontation. But even an international confrontation at the United Nations could be perceived from them as a help.
Is any of this going to force Iran to the talks table to get diplomacy going again?
I think the Obama administration came into office with a very good way of trying to engage Iran. Unfortunately, in the last month, it's moved away from that. Instead of actually taking up the Iranians' semi-offer of negotiations, because Iran at first agreed with the U.S. offer and then put a lot of qualifications and buts to it. And the Obama administration, instead of actually following those buts and saying, well, let's deal with the buts, took the buts as a rejection of the original offer. So we're back to almost where we were with the Bush administration, that the Obama administration seems to be now working towards sanctions.
So what happens next? You think this is going down the route of sanctions now?
It's a slippery road, because if we go down the sanctions, the question is what comes next. The sanctions will not work, and then the question is, what does the U.S. do once they don't work?
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.